WWT presents Experts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of WWT Experts. I'm your host, Matthew Coble, as always, and today I'm delighted to be here with two colleagues from Worldwide Technology. So we're going to talk about, cloud providers and telecommunications companies sit really on the front lines of the cyber battlefield right now, and more than ever, both allies and adversaries are leveraging artificial intelligence to gain an advantage. And that's why we're here with Greg Schoeny and Jason Cook to discuss how service providers can leverage cloud-native applications, distributed workforces, and AI to ensure they have a robust and resilient cybersecurity posture while maintaining, good business agility and delivering excellent customer experiences. And this is one episode in a four-part series that we have on the telecommunications industry and how service providers are thinking about business agility, digital security, and artificial intelligence. So if you enjoy this, check out those other episodes. All right, so with me today, first, Greg Schoeny is a Senior Vice President of Services and Strategy Solutions for Worldwide Technology's global service provider business. As such, Greg helps our clients in this industry with really all aspects of business and technology needs, but notably security, 5G, mobile edge computing, cloud, automation, and of course, overall business and technology strategy. Also with us is Jason Cook, who's the Field Chief Information Security Officer for the service provider business at Worldwide Technology. Jason has over 25 years of experience in the industry. Before joining us, he was CISO for British Telecom Americas, the Chertoff Group, and Raising Cane's. And he's also served as a virtual CISO for several mid-market and enterprise companies. Jason's also called upon frequently as a speaker in national and international security, IT, and cybersecurity forums. And he's regularly sought out by CEOs and other business executives for his advice and guidance on this topic. So, perfect to have him here with us. Greg, Jason, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Yeah, well, let's jump right in. So, Jason, coming to you first. So where do we see service providers focused this year when it comes to all things cybersecurity?
Well, you're going to see with the global service providers really a multifaceted approach to cybersecurity. There's so much going on, you can't just do one thing and do that well and ignore everything else. So there's a lot of focus still on securing networks. That might sound like obvious, but there's so many complications within the networks that telecommunication providers have. Securing them in the right way is so important. Obviously, protecting customer data. There's so many emerging threats, AI-driven and others, that they have to be very much on the forefront of that to understand it. And then there's a lot of change globally as well as nationally around regulatory compliance. So those are the key priority areas. But really, there's a lot that they have to do to just keep the business going forward. And so it's going to be a very challenging year for many of these providers.
Yeah, Jason, great point. I might add, it's fascinating and yet alarming how the threat landscape continues to evolve. We're obviously always concerned about nation state looking to do potential harm, but then just opportunistic organized crime. There are a lot of things coming at these service providers, and they're running critical infrastructure, the infrastructure that we all live our lives on every day, wireless, wired, fixed wireless access networks. And it's just, they're not going to be perfect, but we have to help them stay one step ahead of the threat landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. The proactive planning and coordination and effective communications that these organizations have within themselves, but also within the whole ecosystem that they lean on and need to support is so important. We talk more and more, don't we, around sort of resilience and the way to respond, because the reality is they are being attacked constantly. Everything from nation state down to the kids, as it were, doing the hacktivist stuff. So the resilience around an organization to respond is extremely important and is ever forefront.
Well, gentlemen, how is artificial intelligence creating kind of new threat vectors that service providers have to deal with?
Basically, artificial intelligence is the latest tool set out there. How can you do the same but more at the same time is one of the most effective ways for automating attacks that cyber criminals are using. They can really use that now in a much more quicker way to scale up attacks than has ever happened before. But then there's the cleverness around that in the way that they can be adaptive. So just think of the traditional way of driving phishing campaigns or launching malware. Those can be done in a way more grander scale than ever beforehand. So that's the most obvious way that they're being used. But then at the same time, AI is also a very effective way that the cyber defenders can be leveraging and using the tool sets out there. And many of the technology providers out there, especially in the pure cybersecurity space, are absolutely leveraging some of the most cutting-edge AI effectively capabilities to defend against the AI attacks that they are in turn receiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a great point, Jason, in that there are new defenses that will become available, right, with the dawn of really generative AI, and as well, as we talked about, an evolving threat landscape. There's also a new language that our customers have to learn and understand and operationalize. I mean, we're talking about prompt injection into large language models. I mean, Jason, I think we could argue a couple years ago or even a year ago, this was not on the landscape of what many of our customers were thinking about. So taking your traditional security operations methodology, people, processes, technology, and evolving that now to deal with the fact that you're spinning up these models, you potentially are integrating some function of your data into open source. It just opens up an entire new landscape of things that our customers have to worry about. And yet, where's WWT fit into this? It's helping to kind of chunk away at that, right? What are the problems that need to be solved right now versus what are the ones potentially either foreseeable or in the unforeseen future that will arise from the dawn of this technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an accurate statement. No one's going to challenge you to say that AI is now front and center. It's been around for a little while, but it absolutely now is at the forefront of any cyber operations and any CISO's mind when it comes to, so how are they understanding the threat? And if you know your enemy, they're using it. So of course you have to be very aware of it. And many times organizations are still just experimenting with AI themselves, which in itself increases a massive threat surface that company has. So a lot of things that we're going to see going forward is the governance around AI, how the data is generated, how it's managed, how it's protected, of course. And that's just kind of as an organization is using it. And then hopefully what's happening, and we see this already in the global service provider space, thankfully, is they're already thinking, how can we secure this as we're starting to implement, as we're starting to adopt AI technologies into our environment?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to me, we talk about, AI relative to speed, there's agility, there's the creativity that both adversaries, and our clients and others are approaching. I'm curious if you see one side or the other kind of leading the way, and then also within the service provider market, do you see those organizations collaborating together as security professionals often do to help each other out with AI and also just broader security concerns?
On the collaboration side, I think one of the big themes that's coming out, especially across the telecommunication space, there's been a lot of cooperation, if I could say that, against those different entities. But true collaboration takes time to establish that trust. And many of the the global service providers are coming from many different backgrounds as to how they've reached their current status and in fact where they're going next. So that can be a challenge because many of them have very complicated environments, perhaps from several acquisitions or divestitures. And so trying to track all of that environment and understand it and then try and share across that with their sector is often a challenge. And that doesn't just sit in the AI space, but also in just the broader space that they're coming from. So one of the most important things is going to be to stay very much on top of what's happening in the AI space. There's a lot of regulatory activity happening at a state, at a nation level, as well as at a global level. So CISOs in particular, when it comes to global service providers, working very closely with the general counsel, with the data policy authors and those responsible for that type of thing in their environment, just the implications of what's happening with all of that data. Data's always been a challenge. It's also been, one of the most valuable things that these organizations have. But now to radically change what's happening there and understand how that's an asset, but also now a massive threat to an environment is something that I think is early days for these organizations.
We're talking a lot about sovereign AI. You're hearing a lot about it. And essentially what's underneath that is data security. Where will the data live? Both from a regulatory compliance perspective in market. Obviously, GDPR has been around now for a while, and our service providers are working through that. Regulatory at the federal, at the state level here, many things to deal with in the US. And yet, Jason hit on something. I mean, data security, if you think about it, is interwoven into how our service providers are thinking about securing the workloads. But it depends on where those live and where they have to live. What are you doing with it, right? And so there's a lot to consider there. The other piece too and I feel like this is where Worldwide works very well with our large service provider customers is the OEM community, right? The technology community has a great role to play here in building systems and building solutions that integrate into these service provider networks, right? Something that's going to work in a bank might be a little bit different than something that's going to work in a telecom and a media company and otherwise. So, customizing the solutions based on the requirement of what the industry in which the company participates in, I think is now more important than ever.
Yeah, and we're going to hear more and more about the phrase robust AI security. So these are wonderful, innovative technologies that are being deployed either into or on the edge of these organizations. But going through the basics, the obvious basics here of making sure that these AI systems are now secure, and understanding how adversaries can attack, also pollute and poison the data. Being able to observe the data within that new dynamic is going to be very interesting. Being able to constantly update and test the AI models that the organization is using, but also how the adversaries might be trying to affect that is going to be really important. So a phrase around robust AI security is going to emerge, and there's going to be actually a measuring factor for how effective global service providers are actually managing and maturing their information security programs.
Well, gentlemen, I imagine that, both of you do this, but also chief information security officers of service providers and other companies, have to really explain cyber risks and so the technical details of that and translate those into the idea of business risks in ways that, non-technical executives can really understand that and get on board with that. So how do you do that, and what are some effective ways that you see that being done out in the market?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of knowing and have a high respect for a number of global service providers, CISOs, and many of them are now business leaders rather than just being known as that technology or cybersecurity expert, which of course they have to be at the same time. And one of the things that they are now doing and demonstrating is they're effective communicators of business risk, but then through the lens of cyber. So helping the business to understand and contextualize that this cyber challenge actually is affecting the business in 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways. And being able to simplify it down and communicate it effectively like that is really important. And then being able to translate that even to effective, you could say, metrics that the organization uses to track how they're running the business, but then also how they identify, quantify, and qualify risk, and making sure that that business risk is tied to that cyber risk profile there. So we're seeing a lot of that with the global service providers, but again, that's a real challenge because it's an early thing that we're seeing versus an established thing across the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at the risk of Matt breaking into a commercial for Worldwide, we've spun up something going on 24 months, 36 months, the cyber range, mm-hmm. right? So think about this as a leading edge cyber training center in which we can come alongside our CISO organization and their teams and help make their teams stronger. It's around doing red teaming. It's around bench testing certain technologies, right? It's around getting into the depth of specific elements of risk that our customers are dealing with. And that's something that's very important. It's talked about sometimes, but not enough. The personnel shortage from a cyber tradecraft perspective, the problem is only getting worse. It's getting worse in the service provider industry. It's getting worse in the public sector and beyond. And this is something that we're really helping with. And back to the AI discussion a moment ago, really think about AI in which what functions could you offload to a machine, right, or an AI agent so that your people could be focused on some of the higher order elements of running a cyber operation program. So again, back to the cyber range. And CISOs, yes, traditionally, old CISOs, 10, 15 years ago, struggled to communicate with the board. That was just something that was known. It was talked about a lot. But Jason said something very important in that the modern CISO is a business person that also understands technology. And I think that that's changed. And I think that that's a very positive development as we think about going forward.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'd mention and tied to that is a whole organization now needs to foster what I would call the culture of cybersecurity, or at least awareness of cybersecurity. One of the biggest challenges has been all cyber and security is done over there in another part of the organization, whereas really now the acknowledgement is across the industry, it's a business problem, but then that means how do you educate your not only the individuals, your employees, but your whole ecosystem around you as to the specific cyber challenges that you have, that you're dealing with, and how it can affect you. So the board engaged around cybersecurity awareness, understanding it, and frankly endorsing an approach to it is so important, because then that's a top-down play that's happening. And in many organizations, there's already a grassroots knowledge and understanding of cyber risk. So the two, that gap is rapidly closing in the industry, but it's still a gap.
Yeah. And Jason, I totally agree with that. And I love how we talk about that as being secure altogether, right? That, an organization, all the employees have to do that. Partners within an ecosystem have to do that. And even industries working together, whether it's collaborative cooperation, as we've talked about a little bit earlier too. So absolutely important.
This episode is brought to you by Okta. Go further with identity that streamlines user experiences, increases customer signups, improves workforce productivity, and gets apps to market faster.
All right, well, shifting a little bit, how are zero trust architectures and microsegmentation really helping service providers in this space?
Where to start?
I know, I was kind of smiling at that one.
Yeah, it's a big question.
So about another hour.
Sure.
I think the reality is we're past the buzzword terms in this space. It's so important. I mean, unfortunately, back in the day, flat, beautifully architected networks, seemed to be the right thing, but there was no security there. And then you put in all of the complexities and everything else that we now have in this space, and the very complex ecosystems around that. You absolutely need, as it's now called, a zero trust architecture. And that falls into so many subcategories as to what it is. Ultimately, unfortunately, it's now you just can't trust a thing or a person in your ecosystem. So you have to have a policy to limit what they can do. And so when we talk about zero trust and the architecture around that, let's go back to the basics of this is understanding people, process, and then the technologies to help enforce that. And microsegmentation, especially when we think about how services are provided out from global service providers, is so important, because that used to be the classic backdoor in when you try and hack or compromise into a massive network. So we're really understanding how you can provide the service with all of its innovation and all of its capabilities, but in a way so that it is deliberately isolated out there to the end consumer is so important. And then you track that all the way into an organization, especially one that's got a very complicated network, what's got network of all sorts of levels, as well as you could say heritage, because some of the networks out there are still very, very old. Trying to enforce just with new technology a zero trust architecture is extremely difficult in some cases. So you have to be extremely creative as a CISO in understanding what that business is, the business risk around that as a result, and then how you're going to implement not just technology, because that may actually be a limiter for you, but understanding the people and the processes around that so you can then use the technology effective to implement a zero trust architecture.
Yeah, and I think in practical terms, we don't run into many customers today, I mean, across our business that say, hey, I don't really understand what zero trust is, and I need you to come educate me on that. It's, at this point, Jason said it, I mean, I would call it a philosophy, right? And in an aspirational place where you want to be. In order to, if something goes wrong, right, you can reduce the blast radius, and you can go to bed at night and wake up in the morning and believe that you're not operating what Jason said was a flat network, which doesn't work in today's environment. I think where we spend most of our time is then working with our customers on how can we help to bring it to life, right? How can we help them to understand what does zero trust look like in the context of their business, of their operations, where they are from a cyber maturity perspective? And that becomes a big conversation very quickly. But again, it's then chunking away at it. Here's some things that we can do right now, right, to help move in that direction, and then set a plan over the course of months and years to continue to improve, right? Back to the cyber range, continuous improvement in that aspiration towards zero trust. And it's a big effort. And then if you think about the size of these networks, it's massive, and our customers need help.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize it by saying two of the tools that global service providers have to be adapting and adopting right now is zero trust, the whole methodology, the framework around that, and the micro-segmentation, because that's how they strengthen their security right now. Enforcing on one level the very strict access controls at whatever level in your environment, segmenting those networks, again, whatever level in your environment, and that's very specifically to help isolate the threats, but then enhancing the visibility that they have from a cyber operations perspective. Not just visibility, but then the control they have over their digital environments is absolutely critical. Because remember, you now have AI running all the way through this that perhaps a couple of years ago you didn't have, and the challenge around that. So those approaches with zero trust and the micro-segmentation are absolutely crucial in mitigating any risks in a very increasingly complex and interconnected digital landscape that these global service providers have to operate in.
All right, well, Greg, earlier you mentioned, the challenge around cybersecurity talent, and I know that that's happening across the board. What are some ways that, you guys are kind of coaching our clients to really think about the rationale of kind of organizational culture, having a mission-driven purpose to help them, attract, retain, and even sort of grow excellent cybersecurity talent and keep the talent within their organizations?
We talk a lot about culture at Worldwide, and it's endemic in how we show up with our customers. And I think it translates into how our customers need to think about cyber operations. The culture has to be a place where the best and brightest talent wants to spend time, wants to exist, wants to thrive, not just survive. The best cyber operations people have a lot of options, and there aren't enough of them. So again, a culture of cyber, a culture of interesting things to work on in innovation, doing important work, right? Supporting the national security mission. You're supporting critical infrastructure. Another piece is, I would say, all the things that we're doing at Worldwide alongside our customers to help with talent development, right? Apprentice programs, taking people from traditional computer science and non-traditional computer science backgrounds and giving them an opportunity to participate in this lane and grow from a cyber perspective. Having been around this space for a while, I'll tell you, some of the best cyber people that I've seen don't come from a traditional computer science background, right? They come from liberal arts backgrounds, and they come from fine arts backgrounds, and they can think in a nonlinear fashion. And so we have to be really creative how we, not just as Worldwide or the service provider industry, but as society, think about this problem, because we have to do this to stay one step ahead. And we need more people to do it. So Jason, as a longtime cyber leader, would love your thoughts on the topic.
Absolutely. Talent is always going to be a challenge no matter what you're doing, and especially in the cybersecurity, even the AI cybersecurity space. There is already way too many vacancies unfilled. Some estimate it globally into the millions already. So what is the challenge? Well, the challenge is many times is not only how do you attract and retain the talent, but then how do you develop it? You can hire them, pay them something, but unless you have a number of those things, you touched on one of them, which is so important, which is the culture. A mission-focused culture many times really works, especially if you're bringing in talent, perhaps from law enforcement, from first-line responders, from the military, etc., where many times perhaps they're not extremely proficient around cybersecurity, but they have that mission focus, they have the dedication, they have the training, they have that sense of working and operating as a team. All of these are extremely valuable components. And as long as they have the right attitude and curiosity as to help solving problems and understanding the environment, then they have the you could say the skills. They just need to be educated into the cybersecurity domain. So you tie all those things together. You have to touch all of those things with your workforce, whether you're attracting it or indeed culture, treating as a precious commodity those within your team to grow, to support them. They're going to have many different paths that they want to take. And fortunately, within cybersecurity, there are so many options that you can take, so many learning and development creatively being supported now by the industry, that you have to stay on top of that. So as a leader of a team in that space, you absolutely have to be aware of all of those nuances to be able to allow your team to feel as if they're part of the team, but then to be able to grow into whatever direction they want. And there's lots of options there.
All right, well, gentlemen, last question for you here, and I'd like both of you to speak to this. I'm curious, as you look ahead to the future, year out, 2 years out, 5 years out, what patterns or trends do you see playing out for service providers with respect to cybersecurity?
One thing is obvious, especially when we think of telecommunication providers at whatever level that they're operating in. There's so many innovative next generation technologies that have been developed and deployed. We hope securely, and absolutely the part that we play within that ecosystem is to really focus on securing that. We do that all together as we use that phrase. But the challenge is many of them come from a multi-generational, several decades old set of infrastructures. So not only do we have to secure the future, but we frankly have to still understand and secure what we've got. And that's one of the largest challenges that we see global service providers still having, balance in that rapid acceleration of innovation, which they have to stay at the forefront of, but then securing what they have right now. And so the challenge and how that's going to be balanced, I think, is going to be quite disruptive if they're going to make a difference in the not too distant future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jason brought up a good term, and I'll just build on it. It's the balance. It's how do you focus on the balance of the things you need to secure today versus where it's going in these emerging threats and emerging technologies that you can use to better protect yourself. Something that doesn't get a lot of fame or fashion is supply chain risk. Think about the supply chain behind a large telecommunications provider and what that looks like. It's sprawling and it's dangerous in that you're only as secure as your supply chain. So that's something that we're working closely with our customers today to really help them get a handle on, because if you can get a handle on the things that are right there in front of you, then it affords you time to go focus on what are these emerging threats. Obviously, disinformation and deep fakes and all of this just offers up a whole new dangerous panacea of threats. So that's out there, but you get to focus on that if you can secure what's right there in front of you as well.
Well, Greg, Jason, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot, Matt.
And thank you for joining us as well. Another great WWT Experts episode, and part one of a 4-part series we've got on the telecommunications industry. So if you enjoyed this one, check out the other ones that we've got out there on artificial intelligence, business agility, and digital in this space. And of course, those and lots more episodes of content you can watch are out on WWT.com. So go there, check that out. Big back catalog of stuff that you can watch on demand anytime. Lots more coming up in the future, so we invite you to enjoy that. And please send us some feedback. Take the survey if you get that, or just drop us an email and let us know how we did today. It's always great to hear from you. And with that, we'll wrap today's session. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.